What happens when a powerful CEO goes undercover in her own store and gets treated like she doesn't belong? Leah Carter walked through the automatic doors, the cool blast of air conditioning greeting her. No one knew who she was. No cameras, no assistants, just another customer in a crowded store. But what she was about to experience would change everything she thought she knew about her own company. Leah Carter adjusted the brim of her baseball cap, staring at her reflection in the car's rearview mirror. The woman looking back at her wasn't the powerful CEO of a multi-million-dollar retail empire. Today, she was just another customer. No designer suits, no assistants, just a hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. She took a deep breath. This was personal. For months, complaints had trickled in about one of her store locations. Customers of color reported rude employees, dismissive service, and subtle but clear racial bias. Leah had built her company on inclusivity and respect. But if these reports were true, then something had gone horribly wrong, and she needed to see it for herself. This particular store sat in a wealthy suburban area, far from where Leah had grown up. It was one of the first locations she had opened outside her home state, a major expansion at the time. She had visited it years ago when the doors first opened, but now she had no idea what was happening inside. Leah exhaled sharply and grabbed a worn canvas tote bag, the kind an everyday shopper might carry. This wasn't about catching employees off guard for the sake of punishment. It was about understanding the reality of what went on when no one thought the boss was watching. As she stepped out of her car, the Texas heat pressed against her skin. The parking lot was already busy, shoppers coming and going, pushing carts filled with bags. No one gave her a second glance. She looked up at the storefront, her company's logo bold and familiar above the automatic glass doors. A wave of pride swelled in her chest, but it was quickly replaced by something heavier. Had she failed to protect her own values? Leah squared her shoulders and walked toward the entrance. The doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and a blast of cool air greeted her. The store hummed with life. Cash registers beeping, carts rolling, voices chatting. On the surface, it looked like any other well-run store. But Leah wasn't here to skim the surface. She was here to find the truth. And what she was about to uncover would change everything. Leah stepped further inside, her eyes sweeping over the store like any other customer. Bright overhead lights cast a clean glow over neatly arranged aisles. Everything looked perfect on the surface. But first impressions can be deceiving. Near the entrance, a young white couple browsed a display of kitchen appliances. Almost instantly, a cheerful employee approached them. "Can I help you find anything today?" His voice was warm, professional. The couple smiled, engaging in easy conversation. Leah kept walking. Would she get the same treatment? Further in, she noticed an elderly black woman standing near the home goods section, looking around with a puzzled expression. She was clearly searching for assistance. Leah slowed her pace, curious to see what would happen. Minutes passed. No one came. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Leah turned toward the electronics section, spotting a young male employee leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. He was in uniform, but his posture screamed disinterest. She decided to test him. Leah wandered toward a display of headphones, picking up a box and turning it over thoughtfully. If he was paying attention, he would at least acknowledge her presence. He didn't. She glanced back at the elderly woman, still waiting, still invisible. Then, just a few feet away, an employee finally rushed over to a white man in a suit. "Good afternoon, sir." Looking for something specific. Leah's stomach tightened. She had been standing there for almost 2 minutes, yet not a single person had approached her. But other customers? Immediate attention? Coincidence? Maybe. But Leah wasn't here to make excuses. Taking a slow breath, she turned back toward the electronics counter. The young man was still glued to his phone. This was his second chance. She stepped closer, placed the box on the counter, and waited. Seconds passed. Nothing. Leah's jaw clenched. This wasn't just inattentiveness. This was something deeper. Finally, the employee sighed dramatically, barely glancing up. "Can I help you?" His tone wasn't welcoming. It was bored. And just like that, Leah had her answer. Leah kept her voice calm. "I was wondering if you could tell me more about these headphones. Are they good for outdoor use?" The employee barely looked up. With a sigh, he grabbed the box, flipped it over lazily, and skimmed the back. "I don't know. Probably." His voice was flat, dismissive. Leah arched an eyebrow. "Could you check for me? I just want to be sure before I buy them." The employee let out an exaggerated sigh, as if she had asked for something completely unreasonable. Without enthusiasm, he turned the box over again and mumbled, "It says here they're weatherproof." Then he shoved the box back toward her. Leah felt a flicker of frustration but kept her expression neutral. Okay. And do you know if they're compatible with most devices? This time, the employee rolled his eyes. Look, everything's on the box. You can read, right? Leah's breath caught in her chest. There it was. The undertone in his voice, the way he barely acknowledged her. She took a second to absorb what just happened. If she were someone else, a different race, dressed differently, would he have treated her this way? Then out of the corner of her eye, she noticed something. Just a few feet away, a white couple approached the same counter. The employee immediately straightened up. His phone disappeared into his pocket. His entire energy shifted. Hey, folks! What can I help you with today? His tone was completely different. Warm, enthusiastic, engaged. Leah stared, feeling her stomach tighten. Hadn't she just asked for help? Hadn't she just been ignored? The couple smiled, completely unaware of the contrast. They chatted with the employee as he eagerly explained features, answered questions, and even recommended a better model. Leah's fingers tightened around the box in her hand. This wasn't just bad customer service. This was something deeper. She took a breath, steadying herself. She needed to see if this was an isolated incident or a pattern. Because if it was a pattern, then Leah had a much bigger problem on her hands. Leah set the headphones down, watching the interaction unfold. The same employee who had barely acknowledged her was now laughing and engaging with the white couple, treating them like VIP customers. The shift was undeniable. It wasn't about being busy. It wasn't about store policy. It was about who he thought was worth his time. Leah decided to push further. Would he continue dismissing her if she asked for help again? She cleared her throat and stepped back toward the counter. "Excuse me," she said, keeping her tone polite but firm. The employee's expression immediately soured. He turned back toward her, the friendliness in his face completely gone. "Yeah?" His voice was flat, irritated. Leah kept her voice neutral. "You seem busy. Is there someone else who might be able to help?" The employee's lips curled into a smirk, and he shrugged carelessly. "I don't think anyone's free right now. Just figure it out, all right?" Leah felt heat rise in her chest. He wasn't even trying to hide his attitude anymore. Before she could respond, she noticed movement near the entrance. A middle-aged black woman had walked in, glancing around uncertainly. Leah decided to wait. Would this employee treat her the same way? She watched as the woman hesitated near a display, looking for assistance. No one approached her. Meanwhile, another white customer entered, and within seconds, an employee greeted him with a friendly smile. That was it. This wasn't just a bad employee. This was a culture problem. Leah exhaled slowly, forcing herself to stay calm. She was no longer just gathering observations. She was seeing the exact kind of discrimination she had fought against her entire career. But before she could even process what to do next, she overheard something that made her stomach twist. A conversation she was never supposed to hear. And this time, there would be no denying what was happening in her own store. Leah took a slow breath, trying to steady the frustration bubbling inside her. She had seen enough, but she wasn't done yet. She casually walked toward the home goods section, pretending to browse. That's when she heard them. Two employees stood near a shelf talking in low, hushed voices. They weren't whispering, but their tone suggested they didn't want just anyone to hear them. "People like that never buy anything big," one of them muttered. Leah's hands clenched at her sides. "People like what?" The other employee snickered. "Yeah, they just come in to waste time. Probably waiting for a sale or something." Leah felt her stomach drop. They were talking about her. Her mind raced. They didn't know she was the CEO. To them, she was just another black woman walking through the store, and they had already decided she wasn't worth their time. How many other customers had walked in and been treated the same way? She took a step closer, her heartbeat loud in her ears. "I bet she's gonna walk out without buying anything," one of them added with a chuckle. Leah had heard enough. Slowly, she turned the corner, stepping into their line of sight. The moment they saw her, their smiles vanished. For the first time, they looked uncomfortable. Leah locked eyes with them, holding their gaze for just a second longer than necessary. Neither of them said a word. She could have confronted them right there, she wanted to. But she knew better. This wasn't just about two bad employees. This was about a toxic store culture, one that had been allowed to grow unchecked. And if she wanted real change, She needed to go straight to the source. Her next step was clear. She was going to find the store manager, and she was going to tell him exactly who she was. Leah turned away from the two employees, her mind racing. She had all the proof she needed. But before confronting management, she wanted to see if this attitude was universal, or just a few bad apples. She walked toward the clothing section, where a young Latina employee was carefully folding shirts at a display. "Hi there. Let me know if you need any help," the woman said with a bright smile. Leah nodded, observing as the employee greeted an elderly man nearby. She was patient, attentive, and respectful. She even helped him find the right size and suggested a matching tie. It was the complete opposite of what Leah had just experienced. Leah lingered for a moment, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe not everyone in this store had forgotten the company's values. But then she noticed something else. Near the front of the store, Denise, a middle-aged black cashier, was ringing up customers. Leah watched as she smiled, spoke kindly, and moved efficiently. She was everything a good employee should be. Yet something was off. Her white coworker stood nearby, barely lifting a finger. While Denise handled a line of customers, the other employee chatted with a friend, acting like she wasn't even there. Leah's jaw tightened. Hardworking employees like Denise were being overshadowed, forced to carry the weight while others slacked off. It wasn't just about who was mistreated. It was also about who was expected to work harder and who was allowed to do less. Leah had seen enough. She walked toward the customer service desk and asked for the store manager. A few minutes later, a man in his late 40s approached. His name tag read Brian. His expression was polite but cautious. He had no idea who she was. "How can I help you today?" he asked. Leah met his gaze and took off her baseball cap. "I'm Leah Carter," she said, her voice steady. "I own this company." The change in Brian's face was instant. Shock, panic, realization. The employees behind him stared. The ones who had ignored her, dismissed her, they all knew. And now they had to answer for it. Brian blinked, his posture stiffening as he processed her words. The owner, the woman he and his staff had ignored, dismissed, and even mocked, was the CEO of the entire company. Leah watched the panic flicker in his eyes before he forced a nervous smile. "Ms. Carter, I had no idea you were visiting today." "That's the point, Brian," Leah said calmly, folding her arms. "You weren't supposed to know." A few nearby employees, including the electronics worker and the two who had whispered about her, were frozen in place. They had just been exposed. Brian swallowed hard. "How can I help?" Leah didn't hold back. She recounted everything. The indifference, the dismissiveness, the blatant difference in service based on race. She described the moment she was ignored while others were welcomed, the disrespect from the electronics employee, and how she overheard two of his staff mocking her in plain sight. Brian's face turned red. He glanced at the guilty employees who now avoided eye contact, shifting uncomfortably. "Ms. Carter, I am so sorry." Leah raised a hand. "Sorry isn't enough. I need to know if this is the culture you're running in my store?" Brian stammered. I try my best to enforce our values, but I wasn't aware of these issues." Leah's eyes narrowed. "That's the problem, Brian. You weren't aware." Silence hung in the air. Every employee was now listening. The ones who had ignored her were visibly tense. Leah let her gaze sweep across the room. Some employees looked ashamed. Others looked worried. And a few, they still didn't seem to care. She exhaled slowly. "I built this company on respect. Today, I saw the opposite of that." Her voice was firm, unwavering. Brian nodded quickly. "I understand, Ms. Carter. I'll handle it immediately." "No, Brian," Leah said, her expression serious. "I will." She glanced toward the break room door. "Gather your employees. We're having a meeting. Right now." The employees exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't just a confrontation. This was a reckoning. Minutes later, the entire store staff gathered in the break room, the air thick with tension. Employees shifted uncomfortably, some exchanging nervous glances, others standing rigidly, avoiding eye contact. Leah stood at the front, arms crossed. She had their full attention now. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice calm but firm. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Leah Carter. I founded this company. A few gasps rippled through the room. Some employees looked at each other in disbelief. The woman they had ignored and dismissed was their boss. Leah let her gaze sweep across the room before continuing. I came into this store today as a regular customer. No special treatment, no cameras, no warning. I wanted to see how my business was running when no one knew I was watching. She let the words sink in, and what I saw was unacceptable. The electronics employee shifted uncomfortably. The two workers who had mocked her near the home goods aisle stared at the floor. Some of you did your jobs well, Leah said, glancing toward Denise, the cashier in the Latina associate who had helped an elderly man. You treated customers with the respect they deserve, and I appreciate that. Denise nodded respectfully, but the rest of the room remained silent. Leah's tone hardened. But others, you made assumptions about who deserved your time. You ignored customers who didn't look like they were worth helping. And worse, you spoke about customers with bias and disrespect, assuming no one was listening. The two whispering employees turned red, their heads hanging lower. This is not just a customer service issue. This is a culture issue, and it ends today. Brian, the store manager, cleared his throat nervously. Ms. Carter, I assure you, Leah cut him off. This isn't about excuses, Brian. This is about accountability. She looked at her employees one last time. I built this company to be different. Today, I saw that we've lost that, but I'm going to fix it. She took a deep breath. And that starts now. The room remained silent. No one dared to speak. Every employee could feel the weight of Leah's words. She let the silence linger before continuing. Here's what's going to happen. Her tone was sharp, leaving no room for argument. First, starting immediately, every employee in this store will undergo mandatory bias and customer service training. Not just here, every location. A few employees shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded, realizing she wasn't playing games. Second, she continued, glancing at Brian, store managers will be held accountable for the culture they allow to grow under their leadership. She locked eyes with him. If I ever see this kind of behavior again, it won't just be the employees who face consequences. Brian swallowed hard. Understood, Ms. Carter. Leah turned her gaze back to the employees. Third, I'm making some changes to leadership. Some of you have been doing your jobs well, but you've been overshadowed by those who haven't. She walked over to Denise, the cashier who had treated every customer with kindness and professionalism. Denise, I want to personally thank you for representing what this company stands for. Leah gave her a firm nod. From today, you'll be in a leadership role. I want you helping train new employees on what good customer service actually looks like. Denise's eyes widened. Oh, wow, thank you, Ms. Carter. I'd be honored. A few employees exchanged nervous looks. They realized things were changing. For real. Leah exhaled, softening her tone just slightly. I didn't come here to fire people. I came here to fix a problem. I believe people can learn. But make no mistake, this is your last chance. She took a slow step forward, scanning the room. If I ever walk into one of my stores and see a customer treated unfairly because of how they look, that employee will be gone. Immediately. The employees nodded quickly. Leah glanced at Brian one last time. Make sure this never happens again. Brian stood straighter. Yes, Miss Carter. You have my word. Leah took one last look around. It was time to move forward. Leah stepped out of the break room, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. She had made her point, but real change would take time. As she walked through the store one last time, she noticed something different. Employees stood a little straighter, their conversations quieter, their interactions with customers more intentional. They knew she was watching now, but Leah wasn't interested in temporary fear. She wanted lasting respect. Near the front, Denise was back at her register. When she spotted Leah, she gave a small, knowing smile. Leah nodded back. Some employees had always done their jobs the right way. They just needed the right support. Leah reached the exit, but before she could leave, a familiar voice called out. Ms. Carter? She turned to see Brian, the store manager, approaching her, his expression serious but thoughtful. I just wanted to say, I get it now. I should have been paying more attention. It won't happen again. Leah studied him for a moment before nodding. See that it doesn't. She pushed open the glass door, stepping out into the warm afternoon air. As she walked to her car, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had built this company to be different, to be better. Somewhere along the way, that vision had slipped, but today proved something important. She still had the power to fix it, and she would. And she would. This wasn't the end of the story.